Ladakh's plan to save its wolf, stupas and insurance. The Tibetan wolf is one of the world's most ancient species. It is critically endangered in the country, protected as Schedule 1 animal under Wildlife Protection Act. This helped us understand the intention behind killing wolves was purely to protect wild livestock. Shangdong are traditional trapping pits with inverted funnel-shaped stone walls usually built near villages or herder camps. Typically, a live domestic animal is placed in the pit to attract the wolves. Once the wolves jump into the pit, the walls prevent them from escaping. Trapped wolves are usually stoned to death. Wolves hunt in pack and target even bigger animals like yak. The Wildlife Department provides compensation for loss of livestock due to wolves, but not more than 7,000 to 8,000. For instance, one has to provide proof that a wolf has killed livestock. Okay. And the village committee decides if the case is authentic. One of the biggest problems is government-run schemes is that of false claim. Wolves that are recognized too are believed to inhabit the Indian subcontinent. Tibetan wolf, whose range extends from Trans-Himalaya into Tibet and China, and the Indian wolf that ranges over peninsular India. Entrance test for central universities, how and why? On Monday, University Grants Commission announced the introduction of Central University Entrance Test, that is CUET, which is now mandatory for undergraduate admission at any of the 45 central universities in the country. It has been launched as a Central Universities Common Entrance Test CUCET in 2010 under UPA-2 government, but had failed to gather steam since only 14 central universities had adopted it until last year. CUET is a revamped version of CUCET and is now compulsory for all 45 central universities to adopt it. This has come after announcement of new educational policy which advocates the need for entrance test for university admission. What does this mean for undergraduate admission at reputable central universities such as, say, Delhi University? It will be based only on her CUET score. At best, college affiliated to Delhi universities or any central universities for that matter can use board mark as a minimum eligibility criteria for admission. Why did government decide against giving weightage to students' performance in class 12 board exam? Government did not favor using board marks for admission because of the diversity in the evaluation method adopted by different boards. Why is CUET only limited to central universities? At this moment, CUET is compulsory for central universities, but the government is open to other institutions, including private universities, in adopting this examination instead of conducting their own. What about postgraduate admission in central universities? Unlike UG studies, conducting admission to PG program through CUET is not compulsory for central universities. Therefore, they are free to adapt CUET for PG admission or stick to their own admission for process for now. Pandemic puzzle. At a macro level, it is well known that GDP fell sharply during lockdown. After lockdown, there has been a largely V-shaped recovery. Did inequality rise? We used monthly data of roughly 2 lakh household with 1 million members for Consumer Pyramid Household Survey. To examine this question, answers are somewhat surprising. Fraction of population in the extreme poverty defined by World Bank as those in the income below $1.90 rose from 7.6% in November 2019 to 50.5% in April 2020. The surprising finding, however, is that income inequality declined after the lockdown to below pre-pandemic levels. Okay. Washington in South Asia. On the external front, Russia's Ukraine war and Chino-Russian alliance are setting the stage for reordering of South Asia's great power relation. For decades, Pakistan dominated American mind space in the subcontinent with an economy that is smaller than that of Bangladesh and limited prospects for rapid growth in the coming years. Pakistan will find it hard to match its traditional claim for strategic parity with India. Second regional trend, the declining charm of China's Belt and Road Initiative in South China. Today, the region can't ignore an important fact staring at its face. Pakistan and Sri Lanka, which embrace the BRI Belt and Road Initiative with a great gusto, are South Asia's two worst performing economies. The deepening economic crises are compelling the elites of Pakistan and Sri Lanka to focus on non-Chinese financial sources to stabilize their economy. In a twisted logic of its own, South Asian political class convicted itself that economic engagement with the US would undermine sovereignty while uncritically embracing costly commercial cooperation with China. To ratify the US loan that will facilitate Nepal's infrastructure development and its economic integration with subcontinent. During Cold War, US military engagement has limited to Pakistan. In the 21st century, there has been a steady expansion of US defense cooperation with India. The current focus on Indo-Pacific is getting Washington to modernize the defense partnership with smaller countries of the region. Trump administration discarded the traditional obsession with Pakistan and began to recognize the strategic significance of the smaller South Asian states for its Indo-Pacific strategy. It also began a diplomatic outreach to Bangladesh. Chinese ambassador to Bangladesh publicly warned Dhaka against welcoming US Indo-Pacific framework. Biden administration seems to rob the ball by focusing initially on human rights issues in Bangladesh, but it appears to make some amendments this week by reviving political engagement with Dhaka. The visit of US Under Secretary of State Victoria Nuland to Bangladesh over the weekend saw progress towards signing the so-called GSO General Security of Military Information Agreement that codifies the commitment to protect classified military information. US would also like Dhaka to sign other foundational agreement that would facilitate deeper bilateral defense cooperation. The prolonged military involvement in Afghanistan and the emphasis on Pakistan first led to the extended US neglect of the smaller countries in the subcontinent. Washington's temptation to throw small states to single-issue wolves in the Beltway that demand a constant feed on human rights and other issues that has seen us US lose ground to China and Russia on defense diplomacy in the region. A slippery slope. Russia's offer of cheaper oil has hidden costs that India must deliberate upon. Berlin Wall fell in 1989, Soviet Union collapsed in 1990, India ushered in economic liberalization in 1991. They are not unrelated events, as they may seem. With oil above $100, the government now has to spend twice as much as to import oil as it did earlier. It cannot pass on these high oil costs to consumers amid much rapidly rising inflation and weak demand. 1991, IMF offered help to India to tide over the balance of payment crisis that came attached with the condition of an open economic policy and liberalized trade regime. The demise of Soviet Union at the time made it easier for India to abandon the Soviet influenced ideology of planned economy and veer towards American version of market economy. Whenever global crude oil prices have risen above $100 in the past, India was able to cushion that shock primarily through growth in export. However, the export in the last 7 years have fallen dramatically to 18% of GDP, which must be revived. US is India's biggest export market. US has already cautioned India about abetting Russia by buying Russian oil. It remains to be seen if US will impose secondary sanctions against India for buying discounted Russian oil, but that threat looms large. India's precautionary economy cannot withstand trade sanctions or barriers to export by other nations in the Western world. There is another issue with buying Russian oil. Typically, when India traded with any nation, it invoiced and paid in US dollar, but with US sanction against Russia, it will insist upon payment in rubles. If India is forced to accept the trading in rubles with Russia, then it is very likely that China, which is India's second largest trading partner, may also insist on payment in Chinese yuan. Saudi Arabia may also insist on trading in currency other than US dollar. This cascading de-dollarization phenomena will further irk and antagonize the US since it weakened the dollar status as world's reserve currency. It can catapult India into center of geo-economic war that it can ill afford. The export remains India's biggest hope for long-term sustainable economic recovery with ample job creation. Russia-Ukraine conflict can be an opportunity for India to step up and capture global market share in goods and services. This is already talk of India capitalizing on wheat export, albeit a tiny share of India's overall export as fallout of global sanctions against Russian wheat. India cannot risk being isolated in further future global trade for near-term discounted oil deals with Russia. Next article is about crypto mining cost. No IT deduction to be allowed, says government. Monday, that infrastructure costs incurred in mining cryptocurrencies or any virtual digital asset will be allowed as deduction under the Income Tax Act. Also, loss from the transfer of virtual digital asset will not be allowed to be set off against the income arising from the transfer of another virtual digital asset. Income from transfer of such asset, he said, adding the currently cryptocurrencies are unregulated in the country. Intra-head adjustment of losses, that is, set of loss arising from one virtual digital asset would not be permitted. Such losses would be sunk cost for investors, causing a double whammy, paying taxes on gains and no offset of losses. Okay, chip sector plan, training hubs for 6K scholars and 2.5 lakh workers. Ministry of Information and Electronics and Information Technology is in talks with select government-funded higher education institutions to develop training educational programs for around 2.5 lakh junior engineers for plant and shop floor management and around 5,000 to 6,000 research scholars who have at least PhD and senior government official said. We want India to start also holding a patents and intellectual property rights. There is no semiconductor company which does not have a designing base in India. Most of the intellectual property for such designs are held by these companies. That's all. If you like the video, please do share, like and subscribe.